wonderful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. For those joining us perhaps for the first time here for ACC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. on Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. I want to thank you always at the top of the hour for your thoughtful emails, text messages, and phone calls concerning previous shows we've aired here on ACC's TV Dialogue Houston, but particularly your ideas for guests and topics and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show, now proudly in its 30th year here on ACC TV. We have a great show lined up for you today. Let me just tell you what our topic is going to be. It is fair and equal representation in the Spring Branch Independent School District on the school board elections and single member districts. That's the topic. The context and the key up for this is a simple one because it's an age-old discussion in this area about what we need to do as far as Spring Branch districts are concerned. Spring Branch Independent School District has 7 trustees, all elected at large. 2 high schools on the south of the freeway, one highly wealthy, another one upper middle class. 2 high schools north of the freeway that are 80% plus free and reduced lunch. So the Spring Branch Independent School District has never had in its 75 years history a non-Anglo board member. And this is 2022, people. So to help us discuss this issue and to look at how we may rectify this issue is Steve Rosencranz, who's the organizer of this new effort to bring single member districts to Spring Branch Independent School District. Steve is also the founder of the Woods Project that work closely with low-income students to develop their skills to achieve success in life. Patricia Cabrera, who is the director of the East End Committee Collaborative and also the former director of AMA, the Association for Advancement of Mexican Americans. And also coming through with us this day is Graciela Saenz, our political activist and advocate, our former city council member, Mayor Pro Tem, and I might add the first Latino elected at large on the Houston City Council. Welcome all of you, and so great to have you here for a very, very important and timely discussion. So let's just start. So Steve, don't just go ahead and dive in and kind of give us the particulars of where we are.
Larry, first I'd say I'm not an advocate for single member or at large. I'm an advocate of the discussion and understanding of the issues related to it.
Fair enough.
You know, there are arguments both ways, and I think they're very valid. The issue is, the thing I find interesting is there needs to be a discussion of these issues to where we can come to a reasonable resolution. So I'm neither for or against, but I'm for the discussion. Okay.
And this is an age-old discussion. I remember this discussion going back about 10 years ago when it really was an effort to move the district from at large to single member. I probably remember another discussion that goes back 15 years ago about the same issue. The numbers have changed demographically greatly, and the number of Hispanics now in that area. So to me, it has become an issue more and more of the fair and just treatment of all human beings and having voice and representation. So let's weigh in. Patricia, I know you've been involved in this issue before, and Gracie, of course, has followed this very closely. I think I remember even a discussion about this, Gracie, when you were on city council, if I remember correctly. So either one of you ladies want to jump in?
Well, I wanted to just say, you know, at City Council, we have a bifurcated system. We had 5 at large, and the rest were single member districts. In that type of model, you would have an opportunity for individuals to be able to also elect individuals within their communities that would be responsive to what their needs are. So the single member district representation is very, very important. Sometimes the at-large seats will be able to handle some of the bigger questions, some of the umbrella issues that sometimes have difficulty when single member districts sometimes are very protective of what's going on within their districts and sometimes cannot see the bigger picture for the whole area or entity, institution that they're representing. So in that respect, there was always that type of advantage of looking at a bifurcated system where you would have both at large and single member districts. And right now we're having that discussion again and in another area and in another situation, and of course that's on Houston City Council. But in Spring Branch, in light of the fact that you have had 75 years of only representation by our Anglo community in a community that is very diverse with a huge number of Hispanics, I think it is time for them to really look at this closely. And the single member district scenario might be the best so that people can have representation. And it is about the situation of, you are a taxpayer. And as a taxpayer, you want services. And when you do not have individuals that understand your needs and cannot represent you, then as a taxpayer, you are getting nothing. So in that respect, I really would encourage a community to really look at it and make the changes necessary for that, for the fairness in it all.
Yeah, it is a fairness question, an equity question of voice and representation. Just since you mentioned it, I'll just mention also that when you ran at large for city council, the beauty of the coalition that you've put together to make that happen is really what we're talking about. And you proved that it could be done at large, that a Latino and a woman could run at large and win because you put together such a good coalition of cross-section of Houstonians. And now, as you mentioned today, we're still having a discussion even on Houston City Council because we have one Hispanic representation on City Council, and that's a district seat. So it parallels a lot with the discussion about Spring Branch today. It is possible. It is possible to elect a Latino.
It is possible, but when you're up against, and I think one of the major issues is the type of financing necessary to be able to garner those at-large positions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, when you're looking at these positions of service that are volunteer, no one gets paid on them, and that's what ISD representation is all about, then who is actually going to be able to serve in these positions, and then at the same time garner enough support to be able to pull off a political campaign.
Larry, I'd point out that today, of the 7 members on the school board, 5 live in the Memorial High School feeder pattern. 1 lives in the Stratford feeder pattern, and those are the wealthiest and second wealthiest schools. 1 lives in the Spring Woods feeder pattern, and none live in the Northbrook pattern, which is probably the most challenged area of the district. So there is no representation of any race north of the freeway. And the freeway has been pretty much the dividing line. Frankly, it's probably closer to Long Point Road, but the freeway has been the dividing line. And there have been, over the years of the school board, almost no members of the school board elected from north of Long Point Road. And so we can talk about it in race issues, but I think the bigger issue is talk about it in geographic representation issues, because north of the freeway, there's a lot of races up there, but there's been no human of any slice representing them.
So how do we find a candidate that can run, that can raise the money or be helped to raise the money, the funds necessary to mount a campaign, and to have the time to serve and probably still have to be able to work and take care of their family?
Well, in this race, there are 2 candidates running who come from the Spring Woods and Northbrook area. And this is quite a change. It's the first candidate out of Northbrook in many years. And Patricia, you might address that a little bit.
Well, what I wanted to address, if that's okay, was going back a little further to how this all happened, right? Because I grew up in Spring Branch. I went all the way through high school in Spring Branch. Everyone knows me from my East End work because there really was not a Latino community here, and I always wanted to work for the Latino community. So I think that the candidates that have stepped up, Latino candidates who have stepped up to run for school board, goes even further back. I think Gracie remembers this young man's name. He was a young man at that time, Yuri, is it Gutierrez or
Calderon.
Calderon? Yeah. And when I came back to Houston, I was gone for a couple of years, and they had told me about Yuri Calderon. It's like this mythical thing that this young man was very qualified, and they told me people came out to vote against him just for being Latino. So just recently we had a candidate. She was the most qualified candidate I have seen in across ethnic lines, ethnic, racial, gender lines. She was had gone through all the training in the school district. She was training school board members. She had superintendent training. She had been a staff person at the district. She had a child in the district, Latina. And she was not running as a Latina candidate, representing the Latinos in the community. She was just running as a qualified Latina. And we had, even though these races are not partisan, she had bipartisan support. And so everything looked great. Everyone loved her. She was the ideal candidate. The school board, as an aside to this, the school board recognized, and the administration has been working for many years in ensuring that that the Latino community is represented in PTAs, on the school decision-making committees. And they had gone into a workshop with the board. The school board had gone into a workshop to look at taking that decision of redistricting restructuring the district so that it would be single member, and so that there might be a chance to elect a Latino candidate. The timing of this election, I think we would have achieved in an at-large district, we would have achieved having a Latina candidate. Had it not been for COVID and the national political climate, because this group of parents from the Memorial side got organized, angry about wearing masks, and having at-home schooling as opposed to on-site, and they organized those parents around those issues. And they found a candidate who was nowhere near as qualified as Virginia Elizondo, and they ran him against her. This was record turnout on both sides, for Virginia and for this other gentleman. And she lost the election by less than 2,000 votes. And it was heartbreaking. We were so close. So I think, there's been a lot of misinformation, and with social media now and all of these platforms, just a lot of misinformation. This district has always been divided. It's just that one side has been silent and to a point complacent, But what really, the reason that there is a lawsuit was not so much because the residents on the north side want a Latino on the board. They realize that they don't have representation either. The white residents don't have representation from the north side, but they couldn't file a lawsuit just on being an unhappy white person, right? So they had to do it on the Voting Rights Act, and Virginia stepped up to be the plaintiff. So if you look at the numbers, we could elect one school board member with single member districts. We could elect one. We don't have the numbers concentrated to a point where we could have more than one just on Latino votes. And even then, we're going to need some alliances from progressive whites, from the other minorities that are Asian, and a few who are African American. But we just want representation for one board member just to have us at the table. The school board is over 50% Latino, the school population, I'm sorry, of children. And so it is time. It is time. And there are issues that I don't care how well intentioned you are, how progressive you are not me. You don't have our experience. So how can you sit at a board table and make decisions that will be for the advantage or benefit of these children?
Well, Patricia, I have to ask, as you've laid it out so well, and I thank you for that history and current reality, is this not a classic community organizing effort? I mean, to organize and to build and then sustain a movement and really go into those communities and neighborhoods on that side of the district and really do what we've done throughout our history, both as Latinos and African Americans, and do a classic community organizing effort. And really excite the troops that this is possible. You can elect your own person as this representative.
So Larry, so let me thank Steve first, because Steve is the number one, what we call metiche in our community. You know, he is a God bless him, a meddler. And he has just been organizing people and getting people to talk about this. This is my observation and my opinion based on my observations of having grown up here. There's something about the Latino community in Spring Branch that is just, they have learned to survive in this neighborhood, this community. They've learned to survive by not stirring things up, by not asking for things, just being grateful for someone just acknowledging that they're here. It's what I bend Gracie's ear on is, please, I need a meeting of East meets West. You know, I need the Latinos here to hear what can happen, what can possibly happen when we speak up, and what are they going to do to us? You know, they're not inviting us to their parties anyway. So I mean, it's not like we're gonna lose anything. So this is how you get along, you know, in Spring Branch. And so I'm going into just laying out some more of the landscape and what the reality is. There are nonprofits on this side of the district that were not Latino founded and they're Latino led, but not Latino founded. So they're the very generous, well-intentioned churches from the South Side have set up many of these nonprofits, Memorial Assistance Ministries. They teach English. They do rental assistance. They have a thrift shop. They do a lot of great services. Spring Branch Family Health Center and federally qualified clinic. Also, you look at the board. There's a handful of Latinos on the board, maybe not even a handful. It's led by this wonderful young woman who grew up here, but the board controls that organization. The Spring Branch Family Development Center was set up. They didn't even have to do a building campaign. They did a building campaign on the memorial side, and I can't remember the name of the church. I want to say it was Chapelwood. And they had money.
NDPC, yeah.
Yes, they had money left over. And with that money left over, they said, let's do something for the families on the north side. They built this building and they hired a Latino to run it. But the board is not majority Latino, right? So when you talk about community organizing, here's what I've noticed. The families, the people, the residents on the memorial side, on the south side of the district, they, without even knowing, they would never identify themselves as community organizers. But the first step a community organizer does is they do a power analysis, right? They have done their power analysis and they know who the people are with money and influence. And anytime anybody steps out of line, they threaten to pull funding. They threaten not to support you. And that shuts everything down. They have the school superintendent, the whole school board held hostage by that. I mean, we're a community living under fear. And I don't know what it's done. I have this, my great white friend, Stephen Rosencranz, right? Just standing there telling me, don't give up, keep going, because we've got to do something. Let me just add one more thing of how this works against us, why it's so important for us to be at the table. With Houston Community College, our district is not part of the system because the taxpayers vote against it, right? Who would this benefit most in our neighborhood, if not our Latino students? But we can't pay. We have to pay out of district tuition, right? Because they haven't voted for that. So no, they don't vote in our best interest. They don't lead in our best interest. If we're not at the table with one person at least at the table, no one is going to advocate for us. We're a charity. We're a charity. That's what we are. And it's great. Our people are getting served, but our people are not at the table. And as long as we continue to see ourselves as the recipients of charity and not as people who are working for our own progress and success, then, we're not even being treated like adults. We're being treated like children.
I think you gave a great example of charity at work and why charity in many ways is so detrimental to getting to justice. I mean, one of the great definitions I've heard about justice is that justice is love in action. So what you're telling me is that the churches, the leadership on the north side, on the south side, are content with doing charity for those people to help those people, but not wanting at all to talk about what is fair and just, equal voice and justice. We have to raise the justice issue. The South Side has to raise the justice issue. And the fear factor is always the issue. We have to get beyond our fear. We have to teach people how to handle their fear, and that there's really nothing to be gained by continually living in fear, because you'll never get the gains you want for your children, for your families. You'll always be a recipient of charity, and charity has its limitations. So I think it really still is that whole classic in 2022, how to help people distinguish between the things that charity is doing against us more so than it's helping us. Charity really holds you back if you analyze charity properly. And so we're being held hostage and we're being held captive by the charity. And that's what happens so often in all our communities until we rise up and say, look, enough is enough. And I think that still goes back to, because I've seen it in cities after cities that I've worked in, it goes back to how do we organize? It always comes back to organization. And
I think the organizations that Patricia was referring to would love to see Latino leadership step up. They would love to see it. The challenge is how to train that cadre in effective leadership and encourage them to step into those roles. I think that's been a frustration on both sides, is the training and the encouraging. I don't know, Patricia or Gracie, would you agree with that issue? Or
I definitely feel very strongly about the ability to train and prepare. I think one of the most important issues that we face, of course, is getting into public office and then everybody waiting until you fail because you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And so the reality is when you are prepared, you do not fear moving forward. And when you're well qualified and when you can speak to the issues and you know your community, it emboldens you and you can do your job. Yesterday, I had the good fortune of going to a fashion show, and in the table, I sat next to Latina who is at Pasadena ISD, another Latina who is on the Harris County Education Board, another Latina who is on City Council for South Houston, and another Latina who is on the Pasadena City Council. And this is just within the last 2 years that they have stepped forward and been elected. And in areas and in communities where, the very same issues that Spring Branch has been faced with have existed. Predominantly Hispanic communities and always been governed by totally white Anglo, mostly men, institutions. So nothing. There's nothing wrong with being a white male Anglo. I could name a few, but no, let's not go there. But then I could name a few Hispanics. So my deal is the training, but it is a matter of organizing. They really got their communities together, and there was the outside help as well that rallied behind them to push them forward. And so those are changes that have been made. Pasadena, South Houston, these areas where they had not been before.
Until we're going to have to do a second show on this because we're running out of time so quickly in this first half hour, but we're going to have to close it out here in a minute. But let me give you all quickly a quick half minute with a closing comment of what's next. What's our next steps? Where do we go from here? And we'll try to have this dialogue again soon.
Well, I liked Patricia's request of East meets West, where our communities from other sectors of the city can rally together. I think it's important for community to know the importance of this election, and I don't think a lot of them really understand sometimes what does a school board do and how it can affect the type of services that their children are receiving. So it's an education, it's an outreach, it's also getting to communicate this out into the community. So I look forward to helping Steve and some of the candidates from the north side, be able to address what their platform will be as to these schools where majority are of Hispanic descent. So,
all right.
Patricia.
Patricia, quickly, you got any last comments?
Yes, and I would just say I feel we need to find some common ground I love the words you use, for justice, for doing the right thing, and that cuts across everything, and just helping our community. Yes, use their voice. They have a voice. Use their voice. Yep. Inform themselves and step up. Thank you,
Steve. Quickly, the last word.
Lately I've been trying to work with a couple of young Latino leaders, and there's almost a fear. They don't know how to communicate with other people. They don't know they don't have the confidence to reach other communities. It's been very frustrating for me to try to help them and find that they don't communicate back when you're trying to say, no, we need to find a way to work together. And so the key is to find those people in those communities willing to step up, take the lead not in castigating the other side, but in looking internally within them and saying, how do I do this? How do I reach forward? How do I make a difference to my community without, I need to point the finger at myself and not at the other folks. I need to figure out what we need to do. Yeah.
All right. All good comments. I thank you. The time went by too quickly. We'll pick it up again at another time. Let me just close with this comment about a prophet. To be born into a world that does not see you, that does not believe in your potential, that does not give you a path for opportunity or a clear path for education, and despite this, to be able to see beyond the world you're in, to imagine that something can be different. That is the job of a prophet. It is a rare prophet who not only imagines a new world, but also makes the new world a reality in his or her lifetime. That's really, I think, where we are. This Amen. Is a prophetic moment. This is a moment that can be accomplished. It can be done. It has to be done for the sake of the people we're trying to serve and the children who deserve a better education and a voice and representation in a world of justice that needs to hear those voices. We all need to make this happen. So I thank you for raising this issue before us. We will continue to follow the work in progress. Until then, as always, we wish you all stay safe, be well. Until we come together again on Dialogue Houston, peace, power, and love.